Games rated E to M. Welcome to Nintendo Power Podcast. This episode, we take to the skies with The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD and talk about our time with the game. My name is Chris, and this episode I'm joined by Ethan from Nintendo Treehouse. Hi, Ethan.
Hello.
And Joe from the social media team at Nintendo of America. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Chris. How's it going?
Great. Glad to have you guys back. And I'm really excited to talk to you about our main topic this month, which is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. And this game launches tomorrow on July 16th, so the wait is almost over. And we've all had a chance actually to spend some time with the game already, and I've been having a blast, and I can't wait to dig into all the new improvements that have been made to this version and hear your impressions. But first, Ethan, how would you just generally describe this particular Legend of Zelda adventure to people that might not have played the original version on Wii?
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point. This is a Legend of Zelda series title that was first released on the Wii in 2011. So it's back now, kind of in what I would think of as kind of a definitive version of the game. There are a number of small improvements that you mentioned earlier. It also is, in HD, which is great to see on the TVs we have today. And it moves at a really nice, steady 60 frames a second when you're playing it, which I think the combination of HD and the frame rate that people will see, which you really do, I think, kind of need to see for yourself. And then you're playing the game with the motion control that it's well known for, if you are playing it that way, with Joy-Con controllers instead of the Wii Remote Plus and Nunchuck on the Wii version, which I think give you a bit more sophistication with your motion control. So those things all kind of taken together really blew me away as making this really definitive experience with this game based on, compared to what I remember, when it first came out. And it's also interesting, I think, we've had a lot of people who joined the Legend of Zelda fandom, family, whatever you want to call it, with the launch of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild in 2017, who may not have experienced this game. And so it also, from a story perspective, in my mind, is a really interesting follow-up to, if you're going to be playing this game for the first time, Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, after Breath of the Wild. It's a great follow-up to that game from a story perspective because fans, of the game will know that this is the earliest part of the Legend of Zelda series story. We're getting a lot of kind of origin elements here. Link and Zelda are not the established, hero in green and, the Princess Zelda, but instead are childhood friends who grow up in this really interesting community, called Skyloft in the Sky. So setting and story-wise, I think it's a great dose of all the lore building and those really fun story elements that go on to become such established features in other Legend of Zelda series titles. Yeah, so that's kind of like, I guess, my take from the gameplay, presentation side of things, as well as the story side and where this game fits in the overall, lore of the series.
Absolutely. And, the story is probably my favorite story, actually, of all the Legend of Zelda games, because, like you said, it does kind of start at the very beginning of kind of all the lore and establishes, for example, the origin of the Master Sword.
Yeah.
And there's some other great, we're certainly not going to spoil any of the big secrets, but later on in the game, you find out about some other things that kind of change maybe the way you might see some of the other elements that repeat in later Legend of Zelda games.
Yeah.
So Joe, what about you? Did you play the original Wii version of this game, or are you just, really getting your feet wet with this version, or what's your experience been?
Yeah, I did play the original release when it came out on Nintendo Wii. That's about over 10 years ago at this point, and yeah, I was in love with it the first time it came out. It was, an amazing story, like you guys said. Origin of the kind of the Legend of Zelda series timeline. I think that's a great point because while it is the start of the timeline, I feel like from a gameplay standpoint and from a structural standpoint, it's kind of the culmination of 3D Zelda, I would say, kind of the end of that kind of traditional Zelda style of gameplay. And it does do a lot of really interesting things with the format and try to experiment in some ways. And I think that's really kind of a core tenet of The Legend of Zelda, right? A lot of the games, while there is kind of a structure to them, they all kind of go in different directions. They innovate in their own ways, and this one is no different in that sense. But from a story perspective, I think that's one of the things that really struck me, and that's something you mentioned, Chris, with the kind of the overall plot and it being kind of your favorite. I would say it's definitely my favorite as well. The characters are so really well defined, and they're pretty different from their usual characterizations in the series. And what I really like in this one is just kind of the relationship between Link and Zelda, and that really being the core motivating thing to keep driving you through the story. So, I really enjoy that part of the plot and how it really just kind of carries you throughout the whole thing. And coming from something like The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, where it's a little bit more of an open-ended story, and you kind of discover that for yourself, this is one of those ones that's kind of like a page turner. So I really appreciate that aspect of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah. And you touched on this. I think you both touched on this a little bit, but the place where this game falls not only in the story of The Legend of Zelda, but also kind of in the evolution of the gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
It was the last main new console title that came right before, all of the big changes with The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. And in a way, it's kind of the missing link, no pun intended, in the series, where you can see some of those changes that started to be introduced that they would expand upon in The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, like the stamina wheel and how that's tied to running and climbing, things like that. The sailcloth, how you could use that to glide down to faraway areas. So it's really interesting to me from that perspective as well, for people that maybe, like you said, Ethan, started with the series with The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, to be able to kind of see some of the origins of where that game came from.
Yeah. And I think for both audiences, both people who have played a lot of 3D Legend of Zelda titles, beginning with Ocarina of Time, but going all the way through, Majora's Mask and Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, that whether you fall into that camp or whether Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild was your first title, there's going to be a lot for you here. If you played and most people probably played The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild most recently, and while, like Joe said, that game has wonderful kind of player-directed story moments. Like, you decide, where you're going to go and whether you're going to jump into the main story of the game or kind of have your own adventures. The fact that this game with Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD is a more of a directed story. I liked your term page turner, Joe. I think will be a great experience either, if you have not played that type of a Legend of Zelda game in a while, or if you've never played it, if Breath of the Wild was your first title, that it's going to be great to get into that type of a Zelda story. I also loved, Joe, the way you talked about from the gameplay perspective of this being a kind of culmination of the development team, the Legend of Zelda development team, and their tricks and everything that they've learned making previous 3D Legend of Zelda titles. And I think that one of the best examples of that is in the dungeons of this game. And that's another thing, if you played Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild and missed some of the dungeons you'd played in previous games, or if it was your first title and you definitely got a lot of different shrines and smaller doses of puzzle solving in there, I think people are really going to love the dungeons in The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword HD. There's so much creativity on display when it comes to that formula of exploring, a really cool themed environment, finding a new useful tool, then using that tool to navigate the dungeon that you're in, facing off against unique enemies you haven't seen before in the game, and then having an epic battle against some massive boss enemy at the end, and then getting some great updates to the story that's going to move the story forward. That formula will be really refreshing, I think, and a really fun return for people who have experienced that before in other Legend of Zelda series games, or it'll be, I think, really revelatory. If you haven't played a Legend of Zelda title like this before, I think it's going to blow you away. So,
yeah, and even this game, there's a lot of, for its time when it first came out, there was a lot of experimental kind of structural changes that were done to the flow of dungeon and then going back to the overworld and then dungeon again, where this kind of blended that overworld a little bit more with the area before a dungeon. So there was a lot more lead up to the start of a dungeon, and just a lot of different ways to get into the dungeon that were a lot different for kind of the Zelda formula for the time. So it's been really nice to just kind of go back in and revisit that and see how they've really crafted those areas to really feel kind of thematic and holistic, and it's really super interesting to see.
Yeah, I'd say there's a little bit of puzzle solving in the overworld this time too, where just navigating through the areas to get to the dungeon, you're finding certain routes and then kind of pushing logs down that will give you like a shortcut, later on to get to the further areas of the stage faster. So and finding ropes to swing across, tight ropes to cross.
Yep.
So yeah, I think in this game there is sometimes when you're on the overworld, it feels a little bit like you're in a dungeon, which is great for me because I think the puzzle solving is always some of the best parts of Zelda games.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that like navigating the environments of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD is a kind of a puzzle in itself, and you're constantly looking for the visual cues. There's a bit of wall that I've learned I can grab onto and climb, or there's a rope that I know if I jump at, I'll be able to swing on that one, or once I have the the claw shots, there's I spotted a little target area over there that I know I can grab to. And keeping your eye out for those elements in the environment, and ways that will help you get to areas you haven't been able to access before is really fun, and it makes you as the player have to play the game really actively. I mean, it's really fun to just play through, but if you're someone who wants to get everything and explore every nook and cranny, it's really fun to look for all those elements in the environment that have been cleverly hidden sometimes by the developers, that'll lead you to all the treasure chests and everything you can find.
Definitely. And we touched on this before, and Ethan, you kind of mentioned a couple of the improvements, but there's been a lot of tweaking and refining and features being added to this version of the game. And you mentioned the HD resolution. The game and its textures are now in HD, so you can play in 1080p in TV mode. And the game, having played the game on Wii way back when, it really stands out to me just how sharp and colorful this version of the game is. And then when you combine that with the 60 frames per second, like you mentioned, and it's just really smooth, the whole world just has this extra kind of fluidity and sharpness to it that I thought was really immersive.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a trailer come out that people may have seen, that highlights some of these improvements that you mentioned, that go beyond just the upgrade to HD and the faster frame rate. But I think, especially for folks who played this game when it first released, they'll definitely notice these things. Of course, if this is your first time through, you just kind of get the benefit of all of these improvements and won't notice the differences much. But we've been really happy to see people's response to some of these improvements that we mentioned, like the character of Fi, who is, your kind of accompanying support character throughout the game, and she has all sorts of tips and advice for you. And I like to think of it that in the original version of the game, she was bubbling over with information that she just couldn't help telling you. So sometimes, in the original version of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword on the Wii, Fi just couldn't resist telling you things whether you wanted to hear them or not. And sometimes players, we've heard people say, hey, I just want to get on with my adventure. And in this, updated version of the game, she will basically have all that same information to tell you, but it's up to you much more how much you want to get out of Fi. So if you find yourself getting stuck, or if you want to know more information about a particular enemy, she's got that for you. She has learned to restrain herself a little bit more, and but I love that it's kind of on the player now, and that's one of the bigger improvements I think people who played the original version will notice. But there's a lot of small little things, especially in the early hours of the game, when it comes to making your way through Skyloft and going through the game's tutorials and getting to the main part of the adventure, really getting your adventure started, that I think people who've played the game before will find has been more streamlined. And I look forward to, there's too many to list here, really. And they're small little changes that taken together really streamline certain elements of the game from before. And I look forward to people kind of spotting all of those and calling them out once the game's been released.
Yeah, Ethan, before you move on, I think we need to definitively settle. Is it Phi or Fee?
It is Phi. It is Phi. Yeah.
All right. There you go. Confirmed.
Yeah.
It's Phi.
That's good for me to know because I've always said fee. So I'm glad I got the official correction
Fee, Phi,
there.
Fo, Fum. Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned the help from Phi being optional. Also you can fast forward through dialogue now, which I read every word of dialogue, but it's great. I still use that constantly just so I can read quickly. And then, streamlined item information. So you're not, you're getting the explanation for new items that you pick up just once and not all the time. Skippable cutscenes, maybe in case you're dying in front of a boss a lot of times,
Right.
And you've already seen the cutscene. And then auto saving the game has now, in addition to being able to still have manual saves. And so all that taken together, it really does help the game just flow a lot snappier and, like you said, kind of at the pace that the player wants to set.
Yeah, and that's one thing I'm noticing too, and as I'm playing it now, is just the beginning of the game moves so much faster.
Yeah.
There's just like the flow of it. I think it's all those little changes that they've made to the intro, but that added combined with, as you mentioned, the ability to just kind of fast forward through the text, it makes the flow of the game so much faster, and you can kind of just really flow through the opening hours without really thinking about it. And I think that's the best part. It gets you into the action a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say, I think taken in isolation, I think a lot of those smaller changes on their own, they may seem kind of small, but altogether it really feels like, a much smoother experience, especially when you combine that with some of the technical enhancements. The game just feels really great to play.
Yeah. I actually have a question for you guys. So what do you think, or what is your opinion, or do you remember what your first reaction to was the setting for this game? Because that's another thing we haven't really talked about that I think is really unique to this game, is that setting of, all of humanity basically lives in the sky on a series of floating islands. And what you learn as a player, and this isn't really a spoiler because it's so early in the game, but is that there are legends of a surface world that lies beneath this, really thick cloud cover beneath the islands that all the humans live on. But nobody's ever been there. No one in living memory has been down there. And I love that setup because that's really driven home to you when you're starting out in those first couple of hours. And then the game, of course, makes you go there. You have to go down to the surface. So I'm just curious, like, what do you guys think of the setting of the game, or do you remember what your reactions were, or whatever? How was it? You both played, I think, the original. So how was it returning to that?
Yeah, I think for me, coming off of The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, it kind of felt like sky was the next option, right? We did the sea already, and now we're moving over to the sky. But I think when I finally started to play it, that's where the setting really clicked for me. I really connected with having Skyloft as this place, this island, floating island in the sky that, just has so much personality and so much character to it. And then even just being able to kind of explore and just, fly throughout the open skies. I think, it was a similar feeling for me as The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, where you kind of just sail out into the open sea and you really just kind of have that sense of freedom. I think you get that here too. But I think the difference this time around for me with Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD is just, discovering that surface world. It feels so mysterious. I think that's a really great job that the team did of really building up the anticipation of not knowing what you're going to find down there, and combined with kind of like the story really being around, kind of the ancient history of the world and the lore. It just feels really kind of mysterious. And sometimes it feels a little scary, I would say, especially once some of the villains start coming into play. That's something I really connected with, of just having a little bit of a different thematic in a Zelda game that we hadn't seen before.
Yeah. Yeah, no, agreed.
Yeah, and I've said this on a previous episode of the podcast, but to me, the Legend of Zelda series is all about kind of that feeling of wonder,
Hmm.
of that childhood kind of like sense of wonder you get from exploring new places or playing in the woods. And nothing, kind of fits that better than a setting like this where you're in the sky, living among the clouds,
Hmm.
and you see that, those great, scenery like waterfalls falling down from higher kind of rock chunks in the sky down into
Hmm.
your town. And so it really does kind of spark the imagination, and like you both said, creates that sense of not just wonder but mystery about what
Yeah.
does lie on the ground, and
Yeah.
why, how did that whole premise kick off where we're not even really aware of that. And so it really I think provides a great kind of spin on the usual Legend of Zelda formula.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
also.
and kinda-
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, sorry, Joe.
Oh,
Or was that Joe?
yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say, like kind of working on this game, it's been interesting because it's had me thinking about like what are the kind of the core tenets of The Legend of Zelda as a series, because the games are so different, and we've been thinking about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and all the games that have come before it, and this one in particular. I think it's been really interesting to really kind of strip it down to what are the key thematics, the key feelings that the series really has at its core. And like you said, Chris, I think wonder is one of them, that sense of exploration. I think also kind of that sense of heroism and hope, that is something that's really prevalent in this one, and really feeling the sense of Link as a hero, but then also just having Zelda be a really active part of the story this time around, and a really interesting character overall. I think it's a really interesting take on the formula for the series, so I really appreciated that. The other thing I'll say is kind of that aha moment that you get with the puzzle solving. I think that's something that you feel in every game in the series. It's
Yeah.
always been something that's just so key to it, and I feel like you get that not only with the exploration and with the dungeons, but also with the combat this time around
Yeah.
too.
Oh, for
where
sure.
It's a little bit different with the motion controls, and even if you're playing with button controls too, I think that holds up as well.
Yeah.
That's something we haven't talked too much about yet, but yeah, that was one of probably the defining characteristic of the original version of this game on Wii was the unique sword controls. The fact that using the Wii remote controller back in the day, you could, kind of mimic in the air the actual sword slashes, not just to swing the sword, but to swing it in the exact direction, up to down, down to up, diagonally,
Yeah.
horizontally. And I really love how the combat and a lot of puzzles in the game plays off that. You might have a big, plant kind of snapping at you, and depending on the way its head is oriented, you either have to slash horizontally or vertically
Yep.
to take it down. Or, in the first dungeon, there's sometimes to get past a certain door, there'll be like a set of weird eyeballs in the wall that will follow where you're pointing the sword. So, you just kind of move the sword around in circles until they get dizzy, and then that's
Yep.
your key to get through. So there's all these great ways that they use the motion controls, or the motion of the sword, even if you're using button controls now with this new version, to incorporate that into the game. And, I was really excited as someone who actually really enjoyed the motion controls for the original version. I was really excited to see how the button controls would work. And for those that don't know, instead of, when you're not using the motion controls, which of course still work here with the Joy-Con controllers, if you're using, for example, the Joy-Con controllers and the Joy-Con grip, or if you're using a Nintendo Switch Pro controller, then you're using the right stick to kind of
Yep.
mimic all those same directions with the sword, diagonal, horizontal, and that worked great. And I thought, I think since this is a new way to play the game, I just expected this is how I'm going to want to play the full game. And for most of my time playing the game so far, that's how I've done it. But I finally did check out motion controls using the Joy-Con controllers. And wow, that feels great too. I think probably even better than the original version with the motion controls with the rear remote. And I really like having the Joy-Con in different hands.
Yeah.
And just it's not just whether it's motion or whether it's moving the right stick to decide how you slash the sword. It kind of works its way into all sorts of other different control functionalities, like how you move the camera and how you control your loft wing when you're flying in the sky on your giant bird companion. So there's all these great advantages, I think, to both styles, and it really will be up to the player to decide, what they enjoy best. But I think personally, I might be switching back and forth every once in a while because I'm really having a blast both ways.
Yeah, I know. It actually, took me back to one of the things that I remember was really emphasized when the Nintendo Switch first came out, which was, you see somebody who's having a great experience playing on the TV, and then they grab their console and their system and pull it from the TV and go out to a park or whatever. And I've played, as I imagine you guys have, a lot of titles in the Legend of Zelda series, and I have this strong association with playing those games in front of a TV, and it really is cool to be able to take a game like this, where you're playing on the TV, and then grab and go outside or just on the couch, whether that's portably, on your Nintendo Switch or your Switch Lite, or with a Pro Controller, or on, like you were saying, on a grip. There's just a lot of different ways to interact with this game now, and that kind of fits in, I think, with some of the other improvements we mentioned, which put a little bit more control in the hands of the player and determining how do they want to experience this game. And I love that now extends to the control options you have, because you really have a lot of different ways to play this game now, and find the one that's right for you, or like you said, Chris, switch back and forth if that's what you want to do.
Also, yeah, I was just going to say too, one thing that I discovered when using button controls is that you can still kind of tilt your Pro Controller to fine tune your aiming and things like that. So you get, in some ways, kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think going off of just having it on Nintendo Switch, I think it's something like mental for me. I think, like you said, having previous 3D Zelda games and always associating them with a specific console. I play my games 90% of the time in handheld mode, so just having it on a handheld for the first time, like a traditional 3D Zelda game in handheld was really like kind of eye-opening for me.
Right, especially when you've played a little bit before, right?
Yeah. And for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, I kind of like think of it as a different era of Zelda. It's a different experience. So like I just always known it that way. But when you see this game, a game that you've played before potentially, and with all the enhancements and everything, and you see it on Nintendo Switch, it's like, oh whoa, this is a really novel.
I'm not supposed to be able to play this in handheld. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, is this like real? Can I do this?
So Joe, did you play more with motion control, or were you playing with button only controls mostly?
I've mostly been playing with button controls. I've tried motion controls here and there, but I mean, I'm pretty used to it at this point. I think there was a little bit of adjustment for me just having played it before with motion controls, but I'm having a pretty good time, and it feels pretty natural.
Yeah, I played mostly in motion controls because I really liked the way they felt, and I liked having the game on my TV on a bigger screen. But it's really cool to hear. This is the first time I'm kind of hearing the way because this game has been kind of we haven't released it to everybody yet, so it's interesting to hear how other people have played this. Kind of a small sample size we're dealing with, but
yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting now. Just like we have. I'm not sure what the number count of Legend of Zelda games that we have on the system is, but it feels like now with this game, we have every type of Zelda game represented on the system now.
Yeah.
Like we have, through Nintendo Switch Online, we might have, a 2D game, and we have Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and then we have Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and then now we finally have this game, which really feels like we're just encompassing all those different types, and it's such a nice wide breadth of games on the system.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, well, I could talk forever and ever about this game,
I know.
But I suppose we should move on. But any last thoughts from either one of you about The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD?
Anything from you, Joe?
Yeah, I'll just say, I'm having a great time experiencing this game again, and I'm feeling the same kind of just really, like I said, it's a page turner, right? I'm feeling myself really pulled through the experience again. So I've been playing a lot in the few days that I've had the game, and it's a really great time, and I'm really excited for people to get their hands on it, especially if you haven't played it before.
Yeah, I think that goes for me too. I mean, having spent the amount of time I have working on just talking to other people in the company about this game and playing it, I'm really excited for people to get their hands on it, both for those who have played it before on the Wii, and to see what their thoughts are on the improvements, or just revisiting a game like this after 10 years. But I'm really also wanting to hear I think I'm gonna be talking. I have kids myself, and my daughter, Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, was her first Legend of Zelda game that she played through all by herself. Occasionally coming to me for help, but she hasn't played this game before, and so I'm curious for that audience out there that. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was their first big Legend of Zelda title. What do they think going to the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD? So for me, it was a feeling of coming home, but I'm really curious to hear what that newer audience has to think of this game. So.
Yeah. And no matter what, I think everybody can agree that the music is amazing.
Oh my gosh.
So
we didn't I mean, there's so much to talk about with
takeaway.
this game. We didn't even wade into the fully orchestrated music, which is fantastic. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll have one of the cooler themes at the very end of the episode so people can check that out. And then one last thing I'll add onto the music is we talked about the story. This game also has some of my favorite supporting characters.
Oh, yes.
Obviously, Link's great. This is my favorite iteration of Zelda. But then you think about Groose, who's
Groose gang
kind of an
represent.
kind of an interesting character, a bit of an antagonist early on.
Yep.
And then Girahim, who's just creepy,
Yep.
kind of a creepy primary villain. And then Fi, who we talked about before, I really like. So I think there's just a lot of great elements of this game.
I also think seeing this game's iteration of Link and Zelda is really fun. That's kind of a fun thing that we've had with a lot of the recent titles in the series, I think. But I think, Joe, you kind of alluded to it. They have a great relationship, having grown up as childhood friends, and just seeing the roles they play and in this particular title is really fun. I think again, fans of the series, wherever you got your start in the series, will really enjoy that.
Yeah, definitely. And any villain that can catch your sword with 2 fingers is a plus in my book. So.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to Players' Pulse. A few days ago, just for fun, like always, we posted 3 polls on Twitter for Nintendo fans to answer. And this time, the questions were all themed around the Legend of Zelda series. And we asked fans to choose the items that they would take on their own epic adventure. And the first question was, which secondary weapon would you take? And the options we gave were bombs, boomerang, and bow. So, Joe, if you had to choose one of those to take on your own adventure, which one are you grabbing?
I'm going to go with the bow. And this is by process of elimination. I'm a very clumsy person, so if I did anything with bombs, I'd probably hurt myself. Same with boomerang. So it has to be bow. Although, I don't know, that might be a little bit more complicated to use. So I think no matter what happens, I'd probably hurt myself in some way.
Ethan, how about you? Bombs, boomerang, or bow?
It's a tough call. I think I'm going to go with what I think is a little bit of the dark horse choice and say boomerang. I love the boomerangs. You can go grab items that are far away, kind of an underappreciated utility of that item. And then, depending on the enemy, you can stun enemies with it. And it sometimes just has some surprising uses. It's one of those items in a Legend of Zelda game that you just kind of maybe this will work, and you try it and it does. To hit a far off switch or, whatever it is, it sometimes has some surprising effectiveness. So I like the boomerang.
That's my pick too, just because it's so fun to use. I love throwing it, and then as it's hitting an enemy, but then as it's coming back, repositioning yourself so that another enemy gets caught in that return fire. Yeah. And then, like you said, you just lay on the couch and use it to grab snacks back and forth without having to stand up. However, the fans went with Joe's pick, bow.
Oh, interesting.
By a pretty sizable 64%.
Whoa.
And bombs and boomerang were pretty much tied behind that.
Wow.
Bombs are great too. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah.
I mean, if you got a cave
have you ever
door
thrown
that you need opened?
What was that?
You ever thrown a boomerang in real life? Has it ever actually come back to you?
I have not.
Actually works for me.
I have not. No, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I would end up hurting myself if I tried it in real life. All right, so the next question was, which ride would you choose? And this is a tough one. The choices were Epona, a loft wing, or the master cycle.
Oh man!
And which one are you kind of bolting out of the castle on?
Me?
In search for adventure.
I'm going loft wing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going loft wing also. I mean, the other ones are on the ground. Okay.
Yeah.
I would agree with both you guys. I mean, flying would be so much faster and more fun, in my opinion. However, Epona was the big winner here with
Okay.
41%.
Okay.
I think Epona is just, a beloved horse
Yep.
from the series that fans have grown to love ever since Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. So,
Yeah. You can't go
but yeah, Epona did great. Next was Master Cycle, not too far behind, and then Loftwing, not too far behind that.
We'll see. We'll see if we were to do that poll again in a couple weeks, if Loftwing would fare any better. Because
Yeah, maybe. All right, so finally, the last question we asked was, which Triforce would you pick? Triforce of Courage, Triforce of Power, or Triforce of Wisdom? I'm going to say for myself, I picked Triforce of Wisdom. I thought, maybe it could give me a little bit of good luck in solving puzzles.
I'm going to go, hopefully this doesn't reflect poorly on me, but I'll go Triforce of Power.
Heck yeah.
And mainly because, Ganondorf's my favorite character, and I use him in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Oh, nice.
He's one of the best villains, so gotta go with that.
Oh, the dark side.
Yeah. It's a tough call. It's a tough call for this one, too. I'll go Triforce of Wisdom myself as well. I love learning new things. I love doing deep dives into subjects that I've, gotten interested in, and knowledge is power. So maybe I could, get two birds with one stone there. I don't know. That's just being cheesy, but.
Well, you know what? This was the closest category. All three options got in the 30% range.
Oh, wow.
But eking out the win here was Triforce of Wisdom at 37%.
You guys chose right.
Well, when it comes to the Triforce, you really can't go wrong.
Fair enough.
All right, so the next section is Nintendo Power Game Club. And this is the section where we talk about, a game. We all pick a game beforehand and play it and then discuss it, kind of like a book club. And this time we picked a game called Blossom Tales: The Sleeping King from Castle Pixel and FDG Entertainment. Now, this game actually came out a few years ago in 2017 and had a great response, but I thought even more people should probably know about it, especially fans of The Legend of Zelda, because the developer has talked about how the game is similar to The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for Super NES, which is one of my personal all-time favorite games. So before we dig in, I was just going to give a very brief description of the game from its page at Nintendo.com. And here's what it says. Explore a vast open game world in classic action-adventure fashion as Lily, Knight of the Rose. Slash your way through monster-infested dungeons to save the Kingdom of Blossom from eternal darkness. Collect unique weapons, spells, and items during your journey to take down powerful bosses and solve clever puzzles. Be part of a vivid, dynamic story passed down from grandfather to grandchildren by influencing the course of events yourself. So, Joe, let's start with you. What was your first impression of this game?
Yeah, this is a really cool game. Immediately reminded of Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, like you mentioned, and the core gameplay is very much inspired by that. But what I really appreciate about this one is kind of the overall kind of story framing. Is essentially someone else is telling the story to their grandkids. And that really allows for some really interesting things that are done with the narrative and kind of the structure of the game that you don't expect. So there are sometimes when you might enter an area, as this character is retelling the story, one of the kids might ask, what enemies were there, or what made something to make it a little bit more interesting, and then they're able to spice up the story, and you can actually choose which enemies were there in that specific scenario. So I really appreciate those kind of things that for games like Blossom Tales, what I always find really fascinating is the fine balance between kind of that core gameplay that's very much inspired by another franchise, but then also finding ways to kind of innovate on that and look for new areas to really change it up and surprise you. And I think this is a game that definitely does that.
Definitely. Ethan, what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, I have to agree that I like Joe said, I really like the frame story dynamic of this grandfather telling a story to his children. It made me remember things like A Princess Bride or something like that. And at key story moments, you'll see what's happening in the game, but you'll get some text overlaid on the screen of the grandpa reading the story to his grandchildren and them piping in. And I loved, Joe, the first time that happened to me too, where it was like, and then the hero arrived, at this village, and what was it that happened there, and you as the player then get an option to say, from a couple choices, what happened next, and that's really cool, and that's something that wasn't present in, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. But I also, as a big fan of that game, I loved seeing. There were a lot of really great homage elements, from the top-down perspective to the 16-bit style graphics. Even the sword play that you have as a character, some of the items you see, the fact that you're collecting pieces of heart. There are a lot of things that are there that are, I think, little bits of love directed at the Legend of Zelda series. But like you said, Joe, it's not. It goes far beyond that, I think, and really kind of takes that as a template and then runs off with it. So I loved, as a fan of RPG games, like, somebody who likes lots of story elements or likes to hear from NPCs and get information about where to go next. There's a lot of text in this game if you want to, engage with it. So I loved talking to the different town characters or the soldiers around the castle. And, at some point I talked to one character more than once. And I was shocked to see that you could talk to this character over and over again, and they would say different things each time, as opposed to, for those of us who have played games like this a long time, you're used to a character having one line of text that they will say from now until eternity, no matter how many times you talk to them. And they had done that. That was a cool thing that they had done, just little innovations like that. And the world seems very colorful, diverse. There's lots of neat areas to explore and really expansive. So once I got turned loose in the overworld and had control of my own, it was like, whoa, this place is huge and it's very dense. Like there's a lot to do on each screen, and a lot to interact with. So this is one I'm really looking forward to putting more time into. And I definitely will, because I'm, like you said, Chris, I'm a big fan of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and games like that. So
Yeah, definitely. And I'm right at the end of the game. I haven't quite beaten it yet.
Oh, nice.
But I've kind of for whatever reason, I think another game must have come out that stole my attention away. I'd gotten really far in the game and was really enjoying it quite a while ago. And so I was looking at this as an opportunity to go back and kind of reconnect with it and try to finish it up. And I'm definitely going to do that after we record here. But you mentioned, I think you both mentioned kind of the how charming it is, the framing of the story with the grandfather telling the game as a story to his grandchildren, and one of the grandchildren, Lily, is actually the star of the game.
Yep.
That's who you play as, and that kind of charm and that kind of slight bit of humor carries through the rest of the game. Like you talked about talking to so many NPCs. There's some that are just silly and fun. There's this one guy who's doing research on zombies, and if you can bring him back, I think 20 zombie brains, then it gets you a piece of heart or something like that. And so there's all these great little side challenges. And whenever you're talking to people in towns, and there's several towns in the game, so you're going through snowy mountains, caves, forests, swamplands, the kind of usual adventuring places. But there's a lot of great visual variety, and with each area comes different little, side quests and challenges and people that you get to meet, towns you get to explore. So yeah, there's a lot there, and there's a lot of like very traditional type dungeons as well, where you're taking the items that you have, some of them very familiar to fans of The Legend of Zelda, like boomerangs, bombs, your shield, a shovel, bow and arrow. And but then a lot of stuff that is new too. And I liked, even with some of the more classic kind of items, the ability to, if you find the right people to do this and complete the right requirements, to kind of upgrade your weapons. Each weapon
cool.
kind of has an upgraded version. So you can get like bombs plus or bow plus. And then going back out and having that extra little bit of advantage when you're in the dungeons and you're solving puzzles and fighting bosses and doing all that great stuff. But speaking of kind of more modern improvements as well, you have a very big overworld, but unlike maybe some of the earlier Legend of Zelda games, you have warp points.
Yes,
So they're pretty generous with those. You can skip around the world.
Yeah, I loved that.
Of course, the game, despite the kind of Super NES, slightly enhanced Super NES level of graphics, It's in widescreen. There's some nice rumble features. There's the game auto saves. There's a lot of so while you're getting that kind of nostalgic classic experience, you're getting a lot of those kind of modern quality of life improvements as well.
Yeah, for sure. I also really loved the way it moved. I mean, it's really snappy. Like the character moves around the screen really quickly. So if you're somebody who's into the gameplay element, I think you'll really enjoy this. And I got the impression, and Chris, maybe you can confirm or deny this, but I got the impression that once you had more tools at your disposal, that you could, probably kind of just become a pretty swift enemy defeating machine. I was thinking I didn't play Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past alongside it, but it felt like you were moving a little quicker than Link did in that game, and I just I think for people who like that more on the go kind of run and hack and slash kind of action, will really appreciate this game, and I thought of that as kind of another more of an upgrade you're used to in modern games. You expect maybe a little more speed out of them, so I don't know how that develops as the game goes on, but I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, I think there's just a great fluidity to the motion of the character. As you're kind of moving them all around the world in that top-down view with the control stick, it just feels really great and fluid and snappy. And I did just get an item playing last night that does give you a burst of speed, so you can kind of tack that on. And then there are parts where you're just fighting hordes of enemies, like when you're going through the mountains and the zombies are coming after you. And I say zombies, they're like very cartoony and almost cute in a way, but you'll just throw that boomerang off, and then while it's cutting down like a whole row of zombies, and then coming back and cutting down a whole other row, I'm turning around and kind of using my sword to slash enemies, maybe even throwing a bomb. And
that sounds awesome.
You kind of get that all going at once, and you start to feel pretty cool. So there's a lot there that you can kind of build on and kind of get used to. And it can be challenging at points. So it helps to get those improved versions of the weapons and then really kind of figure out how to use them well.
Yeah. One thing I noticed is the game's not afraid to throw a lot of enemies at you. And I actually found it pretty challenging, not just in the combat, but I found some of the puzzles to be really quite clever too. There was one in particular where you just had to memorize kind of these stones that you had to hit in a certain order. And I was surprised at how long it went. I really had my memory tested. I had a hard time just trying to memorize all of them. So, and also somebody was talking to me at the same time, so that might have hurt me.
Yeah, it can be tricky. Oh, but one thing I was going to say too, I got a little lost for a while. I had put the game down for quite a while before I came back to it. But then as I was refreshing my memory on how to play it, I remembered that the game, if you go to the pause menu, it has a log. And also when you reload your save, the grandfather again tells you where you were at in the story and where you were headed.
Yeah, that's really nice.
It was easy. Yeah, it was easy for me to kind of remind myself, I need to go north. I'm trying to find a dungeon to the north, and I was back in the swing of it.
It's cute. It like fits the narrative too of like what you would do if you were reading a book you'd been away from for a little while. Now where were we? Let's remind ourselves of our tale here. So they do a good job, I think, of weaving that frame story into the game, and that's a great reminder that Lily is one of the grandkids and the hero of the game. So this is another one I think I'm gonna introduce to my daughters after having checked it out. So I think they'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I think so. Well, just to close things off, I do want to mention, in addition to the big overworld, and it's got 5 dungeons, and again, I've been playing this for quite a while off and on and getting a lot of fun out of it. And as of right now, it's only $14.99 in Nintendo eShop, and there's even a free demo. So I think anyone listening if you've liked the Legend of Zelda games in the past at all, do yourself a favor and get this free demo. And check
definitely
it out.
check the demo out.
Yeah,
it's worth it for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Warp Zone. And this is the quiz where we normally I would ask you guys questions relating to games that came out 10, 20, or 30 years ago. This time we're changing up the usual rules, and you're going to have to guess 3 spin-off games from the Legend of Zelda series.
Curveball.
Yep.
Ooh.
So you guys ready?
All right.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So this
it.
game actually came out just 2 years ago in June of 2019. And the clues are, in this unique collaboration for Nintendo Switch, you choose to play as Link or Princess Zelda to explore a randomly generated overworld and dungeons while facing baddies like Lynels and Hyrulean soldiers and battling them to the beat. Any guesses?
Let's say it at the
Go,
same
Ethan.
time, Joe.
You got it?
I think Cadence of
it's
Hyrule.
got a long name.
yeah. I'll just shorten it to Cadence of Hyrule, and then I'll turn it over to you to say the full official name.
It is Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer, featuring The Legend of Zelda. Very well done. Yeah,
Thank
Nintendo
you.
collaborated with
a
Brace
mouthful.
Yourself Games on that one.
Yeah, no, that's
It's a great game.
I was so happy, and I kind of disbelieving, like what? Like when I found out that we were gonna get to do that. It was such a cool take on the Legend of Zelda series. So
Yeah, I still listen to it regularly. So
yeah,
it's great, great work music, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, so this game came out almost 7 years ago in September of 2014.
Okay.
And the clues are this action-packed Wii U adventure came to Nintendo 3DS and Nintendo Switch as well, bringing with it the largest assortment of playable characters that had ever been seen in a Legend of Zelda game, which came in handy when facing armies of enemies. Any guesses?
You go.
I guess
Joe.
I could take it. This is the first Hyrule Warriors.
That's right.
that-
Absolutely. Developed
is it-
by Koei Tecmo.
Is it The Legend of Zelda Hyrule Warriors? Is that?
I think it's just Hyrule
I think
It's just
Warriors.
Hyrule Warriors.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We don't get The Legend of Zelda on there this time.
Yeah,
Okay.
later
yeah.
versions of the game came to Nintendo 3DS as Hyrule Warriors Legends,
yep.
and to Nintendo Switch as Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition.
It's always good
And then,
for
of
me to have
course-
these reviews of our like official titles, where the colons are, where the hyphens are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of Skyward Sword content in that
Yeah.
game. So
That's a good point.
It's a great
Yeah.
one.
And then, of course, the sequel, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, came out also for Nintendo Switch. And the first wave of DLC for that game just came out last month. So, cool series. Now, this last one is almost 14 years ago. This is November of 2007.
Whoa.
And the clues are this unique spin off game combined the Wii Remote and Nunchuck controllers with the Wii Zapper.
Oh, boy.
And traded the series' traditional puzzle solving for quick reflexes and sharpshooting in areas taken from The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, with action that was more reminiscent of Duck Hunt than The Legend of Zelda. Any guesses?
Link's crossbow training.
I know it. Yeah, I didn't know if the
I just
Legend
had
of
to shout it
Zelda's in there.
Yep, just Link's crossbow training. This game actually was bundled with the Wii Zapper.
Right.
And that was pretty fun. I should bust that one
Yeah.
out again. I remember I had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah. No, it is really fun, actually.
Yeah. All right. So as usual, we have an audio bonus question. So I'm going to play a sound. I'm going to play it twice. So please,
boy.
if you know the answer, hold it. And let's give people 2 times to guess it. And I'm going to play the sound right now. And again. All right. Any guesses?
So, what kind of answer are you looking for here?
So
Yeah.
if you can just guess,
game?
just tell me in general what that sound is from. And also if you, as a secondary kind of challenge, the exact game it's from.
Ah.
Oh, well, it's the item sound, but I don't know which Legend of Zelda game it's from. I'm guessing. Go ahead, Ethan.
I associate that with discovering a secret in the original Legend of Zelda for the NES.
sorry, yeah.
No, I mean,
That's
but
exactly right.
but you've used it like it's been used so much throughout the series that I could see times when it would be used when you found an item or like a hidden item or something like that.
Yeah, that there has been different versions of that tune played in different Legend of Zelda games. But yeah, that specific one came from the original NES Legend of Zelda title when you discover a secret. So great job.
Yeah, I have this
Yeah,
image
I'm so
in my head
embarrassed.
of like there's a lot of sound effects in this series, Joe.
Yeah.
But I have this image in my head of like pushing a block, and the block moves, and then you get that sound effect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
or just putting a bomb at a random wall and it just happens to find a cave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as an added bonus, I also now feel really old. Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah, that one's been around for a while. All right, now we're going to move on to game forecast. You know, this is where we always take a quick look at some of the Nintendo Switch games that were either released very recently or are coming soon. I'm just going to run through the list here. On July 8th, we have Boomerang X from Devolver Digital and Songs for a Hero Definitive Edition from Dumativa.
Okay.
And then on July 9th, we have Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin from Capcom.
Yeah, I'm excited
On July
about that one.
13th. Yeah. On July 13th, Curved Space from Maximum Games. And on July 16th, of course, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD from Nintendo. On July 20th, we have Chris Tales from Modus Games and Dreams Uncorporated. On July 22nd, we have Last Stop from Variable State and Annapurna Interactive. On July 27th, we have Neo The World Ends With You from Square Enix, and The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles from Capcom, and Samurai Warriors 5 from Koei Tecmo America. On July 29th, we have B.Arc. I'm guessing you pronounce that as Bark from TikTok Games, and Blaster Master 03 from Inti Creates. On August 5th, we have Dreamscaper from Afterburner. On August 24th, it's King's Bounty 2 from 1C Entertainment and Coke Media. On August 27th, No More Heroes 3 from Grasshopper Manufacture. And finally, on August 23rd, we have Kiwi from Stone Wheat and Sons and Sold Out. So guys, is there anything on this very long list that you're especially looking forward to?
Well, I interrupted you somewhat rudely there in the middle of the list, but I haven't gotten around to playing yet Monster Hunter Stories 2, but that is one that I'm really looking forward to. I got the opportunity to participate in when we did the Treehouse Live segment for that. I got to sit in on that and was able to play the demo of that game, but haven't been able to go back to the full game yet, but I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot on that list. I mean, there's a lot of sequels that I think a lot of people never expected would happen or are just have been long anticipated. So Neo, The World Ends With You, that's one I know is very, very important to a lot of Nintendo fans, myself included. So I'm excited about that. And then I didn't realize we were going all the way into August, but No More Heroes 3 at the end of that month. That's another one too. We didn't know it was coming for a long time, and then now it's finally happening. So yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. No More Heroes 3, I agree. I love that series. Been waiting for that one for a long time. And I also wanted to mention Blaster Master 03. Strangely enough, I have a real strong nostalgic fondness for the original Blaster Master game on the NES. But for whatever reason, I've only kind of dabbled in Blaster Master 0, 1, and 2, which I own. And I keep meaning to play them through. So I think now that this one's coming out, maybe that will finally be kind of my incentive to play through the original, play through the whole trilogy, Yeah,
I've been really happy
that should be a lot of fun
to see what Inti Creates has done with Blaster Master as a property. Like, that's been, one that's very near and dear to me from my childhood and had great music on that NES game. And it's so cool that after a long time kind of being dormant, that series has gotten a lot of activity in recent years and some cool additions to the stories and, some more characters to dig into. So, yeah, I was like, whoa, I didn't realize we were up to 03 already with that. But that's cool.
Yeah, anytime you have a modern new game with all the kind of, great things you expect from modern gaming, but you still have the classic kind of pixel art. And something I've always loved about this series since the NES is, it has kind of that gameplay similar to Metroid where it's, this big interconnected world. But in this one, you control this tiny little guy who pilots this vehicle around, and the vehicle is what really gets the abilities and is able to traverse kind of the maze-like world. But then there are parts where as the little character, you pop out and have to exit the vehicle and go into caves and explore on your own. And I always like that dual kind of gameplay. So I really don't know why I haven't spent more time with the first two games already. But the third one coming out reminds me that I need to get on that right away.
Backlogs are problems that we all share, Chris. There's no shame in that.
Yeah. It's a good problem to have. Too many good games.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, well, Ethan and Joe, thanks again so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it's been super fun to be back, and I'm really excited for, just to see what people have to say about Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD when that comes out. And I can't believe we're finally almost here. It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, thanks for having us, Chris. It was a lot of fun, and I'm really excited for, just like Ethan said, excited for people to play Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. I think this is one that I think a lot of people can't miss. So if you haven't played it before, I'm really excited for you, and I hope you have a great time.
Yeah,
cool. And I definitely want to hear more from you guys as we continue our adventures through both The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD and Blossom Tales. We'll have to stay in touch and see how it goes for you guys.
I may be reaching out for some help with that one if it gets too hard.
I'll see what I could do.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
See you later.
That's it for this episode of Nintendo Power Podcast. If you have any comments or questions you'd like us to consider answering on the show, you can email us at nintendopowerpodcast@noa.nintendo.com. Also, we always appreciate it if you can leave us a review, and be sure to subscribe so you get new episodes as soon as they're ready. Thanks for listening, and keep playing with power.